Hello, everyone, and good evening, good morning, so whichever part of the world you are. I'm Nidhi Baushe, Executive Director, Untitled Chapter, welcomes you all to the Thai Global Summit 2020 for a track on the topic Untrapped and Unserved. So, with that, I am delighted to introduce and welcome our moderator for this track, Mr. Anurag Agrawal. He is the partner in Avishkar Group. So, with that, over to you, Anurag.
Thank you, Nidhi. Hello, everyone. Good evening, uh, and welcome to this session. It's a very interesting session, very open-ended topic, untapped and unserved. And we have a very interesting panel with us. We have my three co-panelists, Mr. Manish Kumar, who's the MD and CEO of National Skill Development Corporation, Ms. Arti Mohan, who is the co-founder and partner of Satta Consulting, and Mr. Rahil Rangwala, who is the director with the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation India. Given the panelists and their diverse experiences and the limited time that we have, what I had asked my co-panelists was to very quickly introduce themselves, their organization, and even though I know all of them have a very, very diverse experience, I have asked each one of them to pick just one area which should qualify as untapped and unserved. I will request each one of my co-panelists to do that as an introductory remark. So I'll start with Mr. Manish Kumar first.
Thank you very much. Um, uh, I represent National Skill Development Corporation. Excuse me. And NSTC is a public-private partnership between Government of India and the Chambers of Commerce, including CII. The Chambers of Commerce own 51% of us and 49% by Government of India. And we look at skilling up people, particularly youth, because of our demographic window of opportunity. And if I were to look at what is untapped and uncovered in the context of skills, that's what I'll cover. I think if you look at the total 410 million workforce that we have, and we leave out the unemployed within them, it's almost like 80% of 80% of our workforce, or maybe a little below that, now because of increasing formalization of the workforce. A large number of them who are on the job, but they are not certified. They are skilled but not certified. And many of them actually are in rural India. So they are, I would say, untapped and unserved in a big way. Because I think when you lack certification, when you're not recognized for your skills, we have noted a few changes that comes to you as an individual. The first thing is the lack of mobility that occurs. A person is not able to move from one employer to another, and therefore is likely to be exploited more. Secondly, we have also noted that your ability to bargain your wages declines simply because this mobility is not there. And I think that's a big negative one. We have also noticed that when we do recognition of prior learning trainings to people, which is a small module and assessment, and then subsequently certification, is a kind of skilling recognition program. Globally, is done globally, but we have our own unique way of doing it in the Indian context, given the size and scale of problem that we have, as I mentioned. What we have found is that the poorer you are, greater is your benefit. Lesser is your income to start with, higher is the change that occurs to you in your life. And the biggest change that comes, I think two changes I'd like to mention in particular, a feeling of meaning in your life that seems to come to people who get through these RPL, recognition of prior learning skill development, because I think they realize that a lot of work that they've been doing all their life, which were pieces of the larger work, they didn't really understand how does it fit into the larger economy. And suddenly when they understand that, okay, you might be making a small piece of things, but you contribute to the economy in a particular way, it gives meaning to the life, and that's a very satisfying experience many people have. And secondly, I think that's the only certificate many people eventually get in their lifetime, because many have come from educational systems which are extremely poor and didn't have any certificate. And this was the first certificate that they get. So it enhances the confidence levels, make them feel very powerful about themselves. And that's a change which comes somewhere in the middle of their life or towards even the later part of the life. And that itself is a very new experience to them. So this is an untapped and unserved part of India, more of it in rural than in urban, which mostly we see. The rural we don't see as much. That requires, I think, to do much more than what we do currently. Uh, we skill almost 5 million people, of which maybe about 2.5 to 3 might be through the RPL process. So we need to do far much more, given the magnitude of our problem. So that's all I wanted to speak about in the initial part. Thank you.
Thank you, Manish. So we will definitely, probe a little bit deeper into this area. But may I request Aarti to go next and just introduce her organization? I know they do a very diverse set of activities that they're involved in. So maybe just give us a quick overview and then talk about what area she would like to, what she has identified as untapped and unserved during the course of her work.
Thanks, Anurag, and a pleasure to be part of this panel. So I'm Aarti, and I'm a co-founder and partner at Sattva. We are a mission-driven organization focused on supporting social impact across key priority sectors, across key functional areas, with a footprint in emerging economies across South and Southeast Asia and parts of Africa. Our work has spans the pyramid of support from strategy and research to advisory and helping to achieve outcomes on the ground to our work in support. And what I'd like to talk about a little bit today is women in the workforce, both untapped and incontestably unserved. Right? Like, so at last count, according to the periodic labor force survey, there were 105 million women in the workforce. And only about 20% of that in the formal sector. But this number itself, we know, is really been declining at an alarming rate over the last 10 years. And while some of the reasons why it's been declining is because girls are staying back in school more, and so on, and equipping themselves with skill, like Manisha said. A large portion of them are just moving out of drudgery and jobs like that, which are non-remunerative, and do not have recognition or identity, and hence, when they are willing to work and they are seeking work, they are unable to participate in a productive way in the economy. I would love to share more in the coming slots, but just wanted to touch upon 3-4 areas that I believe are systemic barriers that are today the reason why it is untapped and unserved. 20% of the India's businesses are owned by women, but over 90% of these are in the micro and small size, right? Like when we look at only 27% of women-owned businesses report a revenue of more than 10 lakhs. So we know they're starting their businesses but are unable to grow it. In agri as well, we have been seeing increased casualization of work. Rather than being more productive farmers, they have become cultivators on the land. Gig economy could be another area where women have sought employment because it does help them overcome the regular barriers of mobility, safety, childcare, and so on. But just given the nature of the contracts, the nature of engagement in the gig economy, there is quite a bit left unserved. And across the board with women enterprises, collectives, SHGs, and so on, we know for a fact that from social norms to access to finance to institutional support from industry and policy, there are many areas of opportunities. COVID has further marginalized women's work and made it a lot more difficult. So these are areas to look at if we want to convert this untapped opportunity to something that's productive and gainful overall for community and economy. Thank you.
Thanks, Aarti. I think there are a couple of things that you've mentioned, a very interesting subject, and it's, obviously something that pans across all sectors. So the gender angle, especially things like the gig economy and COVID, should also be opportunities as equalizers. So we'll go a little deeper into that. May I now request Rahil to please introduce his organization and what they do, and what is that area that he has identified as untapped.
Thank you, Anurag, and thank you to Tyke having a little bit of our work and what I think is untapped and unserved. Just quick context of MSDF with the Family Foundation of Michael and Susan Dell. We operate in three main. We work very closely with a number of startups, and we're typically an early stage Series A type of investor. And we also are a grant making organization. I was just sort of reflecting right now, we actually have partnerships or co-investments or projects with all the other panelists on this. So we do have a wide variety of ways we engage in the ecosystem. But from a Thai audience perspective, we are an early stage equity impact investor, which is perhaps the most relevant for this audience today. So when Anurag asked me this question, what is it that you want to talk about? I think the biggest opportunity that we see which is very untapped, very underserved, and Mr. Manish Kumar also talked about it, is the really large 80% or so informal sector that represents the Indian economy. And I'm not surprised that even Aarti touched upon it, because it does pervade everything. I think when people think about India and talk about India, everyone thinks, at least in most panels, people think about jobs at a Tata or a Reliance. But what most people don't realize, that India doesn't look for jobs, they look for work. People work in India and they work multiple jobs. They are very informal. And this is a highly, highly disorganized, unorganized sector, and it's untapped. And I think there is a huge opportunity here. The gig models today are disrupting the way we do work. I think there is a large theme of future of work and how work itself is changing. And we may think that work is changing, but truly this is how India has always worked. That person has delivered newspapers in the morning, washes a car, and then drives a car. Like, he's done three things. These are three gigs almost. And that's the reality. So it's not really changing. I think the investor community has kind of discovered this gig work term, and now we've got a framework to talk about it. So that's what we do. But it is, I think, it is a huge opportunity for entrepreneurs as well as for investors, I think, in terms of being disruptive. And in particular, I would say workforce management solutions that target blue and gray collar workers are a huge opportunity. At the foundation, what we look to do is, how do we move people from the informal towards the spectrum of formality as they work on these platforms, as they get more recognized, as they have digital data footprints, as their track record of their performance is now in a sort of digital record. They start getting recognized for their work they can do, and they can also start seeing career progression as well as income progression. I can talk a lot more about some of the investments we've done, and maybe I'll touch on that in the Q&A part of it. But I'll pause there for now, because I know we want to leave some time for questions and Q&A as well.
Sure. Thanks, Rahil. I think it's quite interesting that in some sense, while each one of you are coming from such diverse organizations, there is such a common thread between what you identified as a key opportunity. If I have to talk about my own organization, the Avishkar Group, we've been around for 20 years. It's a platform that's focused on, creating opportunities for the underserved and underpenetrated regions of the India. So this topic kind of fits in perfectly with what we do in terms of what we actually do for the sake of audience. We are a platform where we focus on businesses that are engaging with low-income populations and trying to either increase or reduce vulnerability in some form. We have 4 operating business. We have Avishkar Capital, which is our fund management business. We currently manage about 6 funds, 5 of them operating in India. Made about 70 investments in what we look for and identify as unserved and untapped. Started with financial inclusion, which was a huge area. I personally got involved in the space almost 15 years ago, and all of India's microfinance market was about 500 crores then. Today it's 2,30,000 crores, so it's really exploded. So I can't call it untapped, unserved any longer. But the space just above that, the MSME, the informal credit that goes to that segment, I think there's huge opportunity there. We have made investments in the areas like waste, water, sanitation. Again, these are not charitable investments. These are investments that are seeking a return. And I'm very happy to state that we've actually demonstrated that you can create viable business models around these. You can create an investment return, and actually these investment returns that I'm talking about are actually comparable to what one would expect in mainstream VC world, even for tech companies. So in fact, technology, we believe, is a huge enabler to reach out to these segments. And that's what our focus has been in our investments. We also have two operating NBFCs, one in microfinance and one focused on the MSME space, namely Arohan and Ash. And we have an advisory company like Satwa, called Intellicap, which does consulting, investment banking, again, all focused on this space. Within Intellicap, we also run a platform called Sankalp, where we bring together various ecosystem players, just like Tide does. So, but again, focused on the impact space. So that's what broadly Avishkar does. I thought I'll cover that for the audience. When I was first invited for this panel, I thought I'm going to be a speaker. So the space that I had identified was around waste management. Again, a lot of the work that happens in that space in India is only about lifting and shifting. So you're just picking up the waste from one place, dumping it another, and not really solving for it. That's an area that we identified almost 10 years ago as a huge opportunity, both from a financial investment perspective as well as from an impact perspective. We have an investment in a very interesting company called Nepra, which is dealing with dry waste, currently managing about, has plants in Ahmedabad, Indore, Pune, and very recently one coming up in Jamnagar and Mumbai as well, where we are engaging with the informal waste pickers at the back end, and dealing with high-end corporates at the front end, folks like IKEA and Walmart and Colgate and Unilever, and trying to work on the circular economy model. So very interesting model. The company is profitable, growing very fast, and has attracted a lot of capital. So good validation. And as an investor, we've made investments and exited in this company. Our previous fund just made an exit, which was 7x of the capital invested. So just a demonstration of what is possible if you are able to identify unserved, untapped market, create a viable business model around it, and the capital follows, and there's benefit for everybody. So it's a win-win for all. So Manish, I'm coming back to you. Obviously NSDC has done a lot of work in the skilling space, supported a lot of partners. Some have worked, some have not worked. One criticism has been that when you have soft funding, then the business doesn't stand on its own feet. And I'm sure there's been a lot of disruption because of COVID as well. So in your experience, what have you seen as some of the challenges of, because the opportunity is obviously very large in terms of providing certification to people in the informal segment, and there is a lot of money that has gone in as well. But why has it not scaled up? And what sort of challenges you are seeing, especially in the current environment, and how are people overcoming that?
Thanks, Anurag. Uh, on this issue of what can be done better and why things are as they are, I think we need to realize that 1.3 billion, that's our population, is the population of the whole of African continent, 40 countries in all. We are a country and we are a continent, both in reality. And therefore, we need to understand the magnitude of problem that we deal with as a country. That perspective is very critical. And there are parts of India which does very well. For example, we talked about female labor force participation is very low. I know that. But there are parts of India which is as high as US. For example, Himachal Pradesh. If you look at Meghalaya, surprisingly, is also very high in Telangana and Chhattisgarh. So therefore, India is very interesting, and the lowest in India is in Bihar, 4%, which is lower than the lowest in the world, which is 5% in Yemen. So therefore, the variety that you see within the country. So the challenge when we talk of challenge in India, I think anything that you say will be true, honestly. I mean, that's some part of India will fit into that. So what I would like to focus on is solutions, that okay, what could be potential ways of dealing with it. And particularly, Anurag, for you, because I think when we look at finance, and we call it soft finance, and it has its own problems, all of us know that. Hard finance has its own problems too. Yeah. So I think we need to realize that this country actually requires millions of nano entrepreneur. It doesn't require very big entrepreneur. It requires small entrepreneur. It requires people with 50,000, 75,000 rupees as loans, which they will be willing to repay back. And that's the money which will actually help you build small businesses in a village. And you can then survive maybe for another 3 years, and you'll fail, because I don't see many entrepreneur who will succeed in his first chance. And I would not put that burden on somebody who is very poor, not educated, that they must succeed. I think as a country, we must learn to celebrate failure, and we must realize that if you fail, it is not a problem of that person, right? I mean, this is the problem of the society. It's basically how we have evolved. It's from the past, and therefore the acceptance of it and celebration of it, and saying that okay, as long as you had a behavior which was positive, for which I'm willing to reward you, you get another chance. The problem in I think what we end up doing is give a chance, the person fails, and then we say, okay, sorry, we never touch you again. And I think that creates a problem. So how do we create that virtuous cycle of trust? Create a virtuous cycle by which you're not looking at big money, you're looking at social returns apart from the financial returns, the economic returns to things which are far much more powerful for a country than the financial return, which people look at, that this multiplied by 7 times. But did the people's life change by 7 times? I think we want to look at that. So I guess that's where we need to put our attention, particularly if you want to look at those who are unserved, and untapped. I think their problem is very different. Uh, just to give you one last data point, which I think will put things in perspective. We're looking at the labor force and their income profile. Anybody who earns 26,000 rupee per month or less is the bottom 25% of India. Someone who earns between 26,000 to 37,000 rupee per month is 25 percentile to 50 percentile. 37,000 rupees per month to 57,000 per month is the third quartile. That is basically the 58th percentile to 75th, and anything which is above 57,000 is basically top 25% of India. And if you're above 88,000, you're top 10% of India. So that's the income profile that we have. So therefore, when you're trying to serve that kind of country, you require short funding for sure. And I think what we should look at is not just necessarily the return that comes from it, but does it keep the country stable? Does it keep the country progressing in the path? Does it lead to greater satisfaction among people? And how could you do it better? Obviously, you have to do things much better than where it is at the moment. But I'm just trying to shift the perspective a bit, just to ensure that we see it in a little more different way. So that's all I wanted to add. Thank you so much.
Sure, Manish. So I think the point that you made around soft funding necessary in certain areas where the commercial model is not viable or feasible. I think that point is very well taken. As a equity investor, we recognize that as well, and sometimes we follow that. Once the path has been laid, then it creates room for commercial capital to follow as well. So that point is very well taken. I know you have to go, and we have very limited time on this panel. But anything you want to add, either on any developments you are seeing on the technology side, or any changes that you think on the regulatory side that need to happen for this to really take off?
I think on the technology side, we do see a big change with COVID actually accelerating the process. It was happening anyway, but I think COVID is a case because of which things have accelerated on the digital side. A lot of courses that we had on the digital platform was not being accessed as much. In February, there were just 13,500 people who were looking at our digital platform that we call eskillindia.com. And we actually have about 700 different courses in 9 different languages out there. with a lot of partners also who have put in their courses now, many of them free of cost from companies like Microsoft, Simply Learn, many others actually. And I think this is a big change which has come in because I think people have become much more familiar, but we have to be aware of the risk that comes along with it, is the fact that, again, to those who are untapped and underserved, probably they don't have smartphones to look at many of these lessons. Probably they lack the the money for procuring data, to browse through all of these. So therefore, while at one hand we are happy about that, at the other we are also looking at that 30%, and that's some of our study which shows the 30% at the bottom who actually are not able to access this even if they wanted to. So how do enable things reach up to that point? That's something which worries us. So there's a positive side, but we need to be aware of the negatives also. So thanks, Anurag. I have to
Sure,
leave, but
Manish.
thank you so much for the opportunity. It's a
All
pleasure
right,
to be
Manish.
part of the panel.
Thank you. I think enough for us to think about. Lots of pointers you gave us. So, Aarti, I'll switch over to you and taking a cue from what Manish was saying. Right, within India itself, we have such huge disparity with respect to participation of women in the workforce. You compare, look at Himachal Pradesh, the northeastern states. I know some of it is cultural as well, but and you have the Bihars and the UPs where it is completely the other way around. So are there any takeaways from us? Is there anything that can be done differently to ensure better participation of women in the workforce?
Yeah. Thanks, Anurag, and absolutely right. Like it's several Indias, maybe some from the 16th century to some to in the 21st century, and we kind of straddle environments that encompass social and cultural barriers across. Right. Given that we have a very a lot of entrepreneurs in the audience, a few opportunities that I actually like to point out, which could actually be fairly significant when it comes to increasing the participation of women in the workforce in ways that are gainful to them, their families, communities, and the larger economy. I mean, the business case for having women in the workforce is fairly demonstrated, right? Like we can increase GDP by over 26% if women were to participate a little bit more equitably in the work force. If we take into account some of the overall factors that need to be worked upon and opportunities there, I think digital readiness, digital skills, and digital enablement could be a huge enabler. Certainly, the ownership of cell phones among women is lower. The access to internet is also lower, but it is growing. If we, in the urban space at least, and the peri-urban spaces, it has grown quite a bit. And in the rural areas, there are workaround solutions. But this is a huge untapped area of opportunities because women are already using social media quite comfortably to be able to seek jobs, to be able to sell their products, to be able to connect with other such people in the workforce. So if there were if there were more solutions and if they kept women at the center of while designing these solutions, it will also be greatly advancing in some sense, right? Like right from language to visual cues to, women safety solutions that could be online. For example, Safety Pin is an initiative that the Asia Foundation worked with another organization, which is GPS enabled women safety solution. You could just press a button to say that, you're feeling unsafe. That could be something that addresses women's safety. There are solutions that are able to help women access, particularly women collectives, which are, which do not have access to skills and or enough capital to be able to participate in an e-commerce sort of a platform. So are there bridge solutions that are able to help women come online, right? Like to help them catalog products, to help them to acquire those digital literacy skills, to be able to then either offer products or services online. So I see the entire digital and contextual digital literacy and digital enablement solutions as being a very large area of support. And I think that's interesting. We run a program that today spans 5 states in partnership with a large financial institution, which is called Digital Sakhi, where women get trained in digital skills and enablement, and in turn they become the last mile liaison agents for several such solutions that can then percolate to women in the rural communities, right? So women could also be enablers, and this is an entrepreneurial opportunity by itself. When we come to the more formal areas of the workforce, I think access to productive assets like helping women with childcare, helping women with safety solutions, these could all be opportunities that are untapped. Finance has been spoken about quite a bit, right? Like it's not as much. I mean, the financial products on one hand is not something that is able to help women, but the delivery of these products itself is not women friendly. So how do we, whether it is reducing the burden of paperwork or to helping offline to online kind of bridge solutions, many opportunities in the whole space of finance. The last thing I wanted to point out is many things work better when it is peer enabled and when it works in a group. That's also at the heart of solutions and foundation structures like SHGs and so on. So can the entire community enablement, peer networks be something that can also be solutions? Because then women are able to reach out to others like them and then be able to learn more from that. So these are some of the opportunities I see, and I would love to see if there's something you want to go deeper into. Thank you.
Thank you, Aarti. I think that's quite a lot you gave to chew upon. I think things like digital, peer networks, etc. In a digital world, in a work from home environment, these are also great equalizers. So I'm sure we'll see good momentum in this area. Rahil, now I'll come to you, and I think we've completely run out of time. So try and be brief.
Very
But
brief.
I know you have made a number of investments in this area. So can you give a sense of what is working, what is not working, and what are some of the things that need to be fixed for systemic change to happen for greater participation of these informal workers in the formal workplace?
Uh, so in terms of what is working, I would say is I think has been a huge momentum this year that works in the favor of digitization and the rapid adoption of some of these digital solutions, which has drastically reduced, I would say, cost of acquisition for all the platforms that we've invested in. For example, if I talk about WorkX, which is a blue and gray collar workforce management solution, their CAC is today less than ₹1 per person, which is significant. I mean, I want to say it's like 50 to 80% reduction over from last year. LaborNet is another example. They are now in a position they've just recently launched a Sahi Work platform for jobs, and that's a staffing solution also. They're leveraging their million plus database on skilling, so they have access to a fully skilled workforce. So that gives them a massive advantage as they go into their staffing solutions, and they already have the employer connections in place. So I think there are certain things from a macro perspective that are really helping, and we already know the cost of data has drastically crashed. Digital penetration is continuing. We've already had early adopters become very, very have adopted a lot of these solutions, and these early adopters are now influencing others to follow them as well. Has it trickled down to the last 10%? No, I do think Aarti's points on the exclusion of women, at least in the digital sphere, continues to be a concern. And I think those are the things that are needed to make it a much more equitable form of work. There are lots of advantages. In fact, in gig work, one of the things that we're seeing for women, there actually is there is a preference for women because it gives them the flexibility that they want to work in. And that's one of the big things that's driving them towards these models. Flexibility of timings shows up as in the top 3 issues. And as I had said earlier, like gig work or informal work is not the same for everybody. For some people, it's that they're the primary breadwinner. For some, it's the secondary And if you're a secondary breadwinner of the family, you have very different motivations for why you want to engage. So I think understanding this customer who's working on these platforms will go a long way in what unlocking some of the potential of this industry. And lastly, I think we can't ignore the government. The government is already making some labor law reforms. I think those are the right step in the right direction. Um, what this year has exposed is the extreme vulnerability of the informal segment. So social safety nets have to be thought through, have to be thought about. They have to be brought into place that works for industry as well as it works for the workers on these platforms. Because when we ask these workers, do you want to contribute to PF? Do you want to contribute to some of these things? The answer is no. Do you want to buy health insurance? The answer is no. Do you want to pay for it? No. I mean, how do you sort of square that circle is a question that needs to be answered still. But without social security, I think we're setting ourselves up for a pretty big crisis down the road.
Fair point, Rahil. I think
Yeah.
it's a very important aspect. And my personal belief is that, over the next 5-10 years, we will probably see universal access to social
I agree.
security.
Yeah.
Right. So that's going to be one of the trends of increasing.
And there's already talk about like the urban guarantee scheme, employment guarantee scheme, right? Which mirrors Manrega. And I think that's the conversation that needs to be encouraged, and hopefully some of that comes to fruition.
Yeah, so there is plenty to talk about, but unfortunately we are completely out of time. We did start 10 minutes late and we have overshot by 10 minutes, so we've pretty much used up our time. There is one question posted here, but it's more a generalist question. Does mergers of startups to grow common objectives and become big organizations also untapped area? I think without taking it to the panelists, I would broadly answer it as yes, but I think our focus here was more on identifying, spaces and areas where, there's plenty of things to do and a lot of opportunity, both from a business perspective as well as from an impact perspective. So I think with that, we've had an interesting conversation, very good common theme along with that discussion as well, which actually brought this together quite nicely. So thank you for to my co-panelists, Aarti, Rahil, and Manish, who had to leave earlier. I'll hand it back to the Thai representative. Nidhi,
Thank you
over to
so
you.
much, all the panelists. It was really a deep dive insight on the topic unreserved and untapped. So thank you so much, everyone, all the participants who have joined this session from different parts of the world. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah. Bye, Rahel. Bye, Aarti.
Bye bye.